And we are live. Hello, everybody.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, good to be here with you, Kelsey. So as people start streaming in here, I recognize some names. There are some I do not recognize, but as we like to do, let's start by throwing in the chat where you are joining from. It's always great to see where people are joining us from on these webinars. But yeah, this is going to be a different one. If there's a lot of interest, a lot of signups for this one, I think people are here to stump you, Kelsey.
Oh boy.
Um,
No pressure.
right, the brains behind the brand. So yeah, this is different than we've ever done before. So we are doing a bit of a bunch of Q&A. We're giving just some very brief highlights of some of the latest features that have just been released in the latest version of ProShop, and we are giving some sneak peeks into things that'll be coming up later this year. So thank you, everybody. David, Ontario, Canada A, and Nicholasville, Kentucky, Georgia, Jacksonville, Costa Mesa, Bellingham, Southern Oklahoma, Cajun Country. Hey, JD, good to see you here. All right. Well, let me start. I'm not sharing my screen yet. Let me go ahead and do that. And we will get into it here. So, all right. We're going to give, just for those that don't know Kelsey or I, don't know the background, we're going to give a little bit of background on where we got here, why we're even possibly qualified to answer some questions about managing shops, and hopefully that'll give some context into where we have come from. And then we'll get into the new features and then the Q&A, the stump question. We did, excuse me, we did ask folks to submit questions in advance. If you registered for this, you got the link to submit some questions. We have a bunch of them we're going to go through. If we have time, hopefully, and we breeze through those, we'll have time for live Q&A. So there is, of course, the Q&A tool right here in the Zoom webinar. So if you do have questions that come up, please put them in the Q&A. They're much easier to track than straight in the chat itself. And hopefully, again, we will have time to get through the ones that people have already submitted and get to your live ones. So, all right, let's get going here. We always like to start these with our mission statement. We deliver powerful manufacturing software by deeply understanding our clients' challenges in order to meaningfully improve their businesses and in turn their communities, your communities. So hopefully we can share today some things that that help convey that we do understand your businesses and showing some features and new things that will meaningfully improve your businesses. I know there's some really cool stuff that people have been asking for and wanting, and we're excited to be able to show those today. So here's the agenda. We're going to talk about a little bit of our journey, where we got here today, very quickly, and then we'll talk about some existing features that are just released in release 5.2.2, and then coming up with new stuff, and then getting into our insights and questions. And then, I keep forgetting this, we are doing a NASCAR VIP pass giveaway. So 3 people have been chosen from the registrants to go to, I think, the Kentucky NASCAR race. We just had some clients this past weekend go to the one in Indianapolis and had just a fantastic time. So it's great that we have that relationship with Roush Yates and get those VIP passes so people can go hang out in the pits, talk to drivers and pit people, and learn about that and enjoy a weekend. All right, let's talk a little bit about the background. Again, for those really that don't know us, those that are clients on the webinar, you guys probably know this all too well. But Kelsey and I first met in college, along with the other folks that were one of the original founders of ProCNC. And this program that we met at was run by Kelsey's uncle, Dr. Mike Seal, who is unfortunately no longer with us, but an incredible man. And he led this program called the Vehicle Research Institute, and we got to design and build race cars for college. And they had a few Haas's. We had an old Mazak lathe. Actually, it was pretty new at the time, wasn't it, Kelsey?
Yeah, brand new.
Yeah, brand new Mazak lathe. So we made all the parts for these cars. Absolutely fell in love with machining. Really loved working together. It was a great bonding experience, and we decided to start a machine shop right out of college. So this is the crew that all looking very young and fresh faced. I was I was realizing, Kelsey, that today, more than 30 years, well, I guess since we originally met, but yeah, 27 years later after the start of this business, five of the six of us are still either working in the business or shareholders in the business. And the last one still is a good friend today. Get to see him on occasion, but that crew has been pretty tight for a long, long time. So
Yeah, amazing. 27 years.
I know.
All still in the business in some way, usually. Well,
Yeah.
almost all.
Yeah. So we lived and breathed it for a long time. Kelsey started creating some amazing spreadsheets. You'll see a picture of one of those in a second here. But yeah, this is the first shop. That's when we had our second machine. Haas VF4 is what we started with, and then we got a VF2, and you can see the jet bandsaw and the old lathe in the middle and the back, and um, yeah, it looks like the beginnings of it. Actually, the tape line, isn't that where we put the Nakamura? Is that
First
what that's?
Nakamura. Yeah, the
Yeah, I
Nakamura
think that's
Tomy.
why that
Yep.
tape line is on the floor. We were about to install our first lathe. So, um, which the company that bought Pro CNC is still using today. And that was not a brand new machine back in 97, that's for sure, or 98,
No, it was a
whenever we had it.
91 Nakamura Tomy.
90, that's
Yep,
right. It
still
was
in service.
incredible. So here's an
Yeah.
example of one of the very whiz-bang fancy spreadsheets that Kelsey created with Visual Basic macros for creating work orders and copying sheets and some of the things that Kelsey you built into these were the very things that when we realized the spreadsheets weren't going to scale with us forever, um, and we asked people to come in and show us their cool ERP software so we could replace, the spreadsheets with something better. It's those very things like tool management and work offsets and work instructions and inspection built right into it that they were like, yeah, we don't do those things. You still need your spreadsheets, but you can use our
Yeah.
software for order entry and issuing POs and I can remember being just very disappointed and kind of underwhelmed by what they were showing us, which ultimately is what led us to start building ProShop.
Yeah, and also Oracle wanted like, $100,000 or whatever. And we were like, what are you talking about?
Price it per CPU or whatever. Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
very
that's
different
right.
paradigm.
Yeah.
And they were all paper based, and we were clearly trying to just be digital from day one. All right, let's talk about some of the new features. I know this is a lot of what people are showing up here to learn about. So the first things we're going to show you are what has just been released in 5.2.2. Almost every client is on it. I think there's a few scragglers that maybe don't have auto updates or a few other things, but hopefully almost everyone will in the next few days. This was a big one. This took a lot of work. You probably were more deep in the development of this one, Kelsey, but electronic signatures for compliance to CFR 12 Part 11. You want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, I'll just talk a little bit about this. Basically, especially as part of medical device manufacturing, there's a lot of, not only traceability, but, individual responsibility that people need to take for their actions. And as part of that, they need firm confirmation that it was, in fact, this person, because they don't want to be in a situation, of course, where, well, we're not really sure who, made that call, or, this is going into someone's body. So we really need someone to be able to, put their signature on it. And of course, this was all hand signatures, tons and tons and tons of chicken scratch. And instead, going to these electronic signatures has helped, streamline a lot of that, of course, but also it needed to be at a specific moment in time. So we built in the correct gating points for this kind of compliance, and basically validate that at that moment that you're actually about to, certify something or submit something, that we can double check that it's really you and that someone else isn't at your workstation or, signing on your behalf. Nobody wants a forged signature on the old hand handwritten ones.
Yep.
So this is what this really does, and it meets that part of that compliance, which is really important. And it was one of the few areas that we felt like we really weren't delivering everything we should for
Hmm.
customers who are in that kind of compliance space. So
Yeah.
commitment here to compliance and firmly stamping that signature component.
And just to be clear, this electronic signature password is different than your ProShop login. So it can be a shorter code or a pin number type of thing that people can manage themselves. Is that right?
Yeah, you can set that electronic signature password differently. You could set it the same, of course, but that is a component of that is being able to independently control your electronic signature password.
Awesome. That's a good one. And I just want to say, even if you don't serve the medical device industry, but you want an additional layer of assurance that someone hasn't left open a screen and walked away for a few minutes and someone else came up and, submitted a work order record or did an inspection or something, you could turn this on. And isn't it right that it's per module? The companies can decide which modules they want this turned on for. Is that right?
Yeah, there are some limitations. It's not for everything, but it is, specifically around, and this was the part for the compliance around changing what the specifications are for a product. So, like
Got
you
it.
can see here in the background, you got this part level.
Yep.
One of the things is they have that, approved part process and compliance. And in order to be able to change that, you want to be really sure that you understand who is authorized and who is changing that. And certainly part of a bigger plan on our part for how to leverage that kind of approvals component.
Got it. Yeah. And I know we sometimes get this even from aerospace companies about wanting to really lock down that process and make sure they know, who's adding information into an approved process and making sure that's approval. So that
Yep.
can be used there too. All right. Next one is much easier and really clearly visible estimated versus actual job costing. So for those of you that are ProShop users today, you will recognize the left-hand portion of this page. This is our, down to the penny net profitability for work orders, which is automatically generated at the end of a work order, even midstream if you are looking at the temporary profit. But we always had the request,
Just
well, I
before you
wanted,
get to that piece
yeah.
about the temporary profit, I just wanted to note for folks because I think this is something that some people sort of either forget or just don't necessarily focus on. But that temporary can be incredibly useful because the dollars considered build, and people often chide me about why it's called considered build. What do you mean considered? Like, wow, we think maybe it's considered build. No, this is considered because it hasn't actually happened yet. In many cases, and in that temporary, that's absolutely the case. This number is not the full work order dollar value when you're looking at temporary. So I just wanted to really highlight that. If you're partway through a work order, it figures you've built up part of the value of the work order. So the dollars considered billed on temporary profit is only how much you've built so far. So these percentages against, how well are you doing? That's so far in the work order. You could literally track work orders, profitability as you go through the whole system because you know how much value you've generated and how much time, energy, cost you put into it. So just wanted to really flag that for folks on temporary profitability.
Good call out. Thank you very much. So yes, so what we've added is this right-hand set of columns, which is looking at what you actually estimated the costs were going to be. Now, the one caveat here is the quantity that the work order is for needs to match on your estimate with the same quantity. So if you had a quote for 10 and your customer placed an order for 15, it's not going to show you the right numbers. You need to add an estimate for the exact quantity that they ordered, so it can really be apples and apples. But yeah, it'll show you, what you quoted in total, how much of that was cost of goods in items versus labor, and shows you the delta. And so in this case, we spent 20% more than we planned, about $500 more than we had planned. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and then, of course, if you're under, that's even better. And then the net delta. So it's yeah. So really easy kind of to see how we estimated it and what the actuals were. Yeah, do you want to talk
Yeah,
about
and
gross
I just
profit?
really feel like this is one that I've been talking a lot with various different companies about recently, this direct gross profit number. So we talk a lot about down to the penny net profit, and people say, "Yeah, but if my, overhead as a proportion of my total revenue is kind of fluctuating and we're always apportioning all costs to jobs to get net profit," which is very true. One month, if you're slow in general on that month, then of course all the jobs you made in that month are less profitable. That's the nature of things, right? You're less profitable when you're not building as much stuff because you have some fixed costs. And they said, so we appreciate that, but we'd also like to know what would it be like if we weren't really including the overhead component. And I said, well, you could always go with the tried and true gross profit item, but that's really just COGS material and COGS labor. And it doesn't tell you anything about your activity-based costing for different types of equipment and that kind of thing. And so we've added this component we call direct overhead. Most of you who are clients will know about it, which gives you down to this direct gross profit. What we would consider the, profitability sort of minus the true total overhead kind of components like, your power bill or, your insurance for the whole company. You don't get to fluctuate that based on how much work you've done, but this direct overhead does. And so that's something where we can actually look at direct overhead and then direct gross profit. And I think that's a very valuable number for people who are looking to look at it the other way on top of true net profit. So just wanted to get that out there. This is like, whoa, okay. Direct
Yeah,
gross profit was estimated to be significantly, lower in this case.
yeah. Great insights. Thank you for that. All right. This next one I'm going to let you take lead on because you're the kind of one of our experts here in this new module and the whole CMMC thing. So let's talk about classifications. This is a brand
Yeah,
new
great.
module for ProShop. So
Yeah, this is one of the first new modules we've done in a little while for sure, and we've highlighted this specifically for control over CMMC as a way to meet these kinds of specific components of CMMC, and help meet those requirements. But truly, classifications and the module is not specifically for CMMC. It's for any reason that you want to control documents. In any kind of classification. So you think about things that might be HR related, and you want to protect those files within the architecture beyond the idea of simply putting them in a directory and that directory is controlled. You want to actually control the file itself, regardless of its location within the ecosystem. And maybe if somebody makes a copy or anything like that, you want to still control those files. Maybe they're HIPAA compliance. This is very helpful for all kinds of files that you need to control for compliance reasons or just control because you really want to limit the access to those regardless of where they are in the file system. And I think the big advantage here is that it really separates from this older paradigm of, you have to make sure something's in the right directory in order for it to be protected with the right permissions. That's still a valid thing to do. There's still reasons to do that. But being able to identify when you can the nature of a particular file, the nature of the content is incredibly helpful because it gives you visibility across the entire folder structure. And you can tell right away if something maybe is out of place. It's like, oh, that's not in the right folder, but it is actually classified with that. So on top of being able to classify, anything you upload in ProShop, you upload a file and you can choose a classification at that moment or multiple classifications. It's also the case that now you can actually drag files into the ProShop K drive as we know it, but the file store in ProShop Safe. And then those files you can use a different interface. Actually, we don't have a screenshot of it here, but that you can go ahead and classify those in bulk as needed. So when you go to log back in, it'll say, hey, you put some files in the system, but you haven't classified them yet. Would you like to classify them now? And you can either say, I'm not going to classify them, or you can choose and say, oh yeah, these were all ones I just uploaded. They're all ITAR, or they're all CUI, or whatever classification combinations you want to apply to that. And then this little insert that Paul's put in here, which is awesome, shows an individual user's page, right? This person is authorized to see these classification markings. So for example, I use the HR example. You may only have 2 or 3 people in the company that are really allowed to look at HR data. They can be identified with that. or you may have it for FCI or CUI. And that's where it starts to really be helpful in the CMMC compliance, which is that you can limit that access to information regardless of location within the folder structure. So you have the approved prints folder. Well, is it always approved prints you want to control? No, it's just the ones that are controlled with the specific kinds for those specific users. So
Mhm.
you can make as many as you want, and those will then be available to apply to any content that you upload to ProShop. And then I wanted to add that last piece on, which is that applies also to content that would be viewed within the browser. So say there's a picture, but it's in your folder structure and it's been classified correctly, and then you browse to it in ProShop, and this is very unique for ProShop, that content will not be available in the browser. The mechanisms that control the visibility of that go across all of those spectrums, both the K drive and the browser, and just direct file access. So that's the new classifications
Awesome.
module. I think it will really help out for especially regulatory compliance, but it can really be helpful in other areas too.
Yeah. And your point about how there's still a good use case where you put something in a folder and then limit access to that folder. That's really what this file access security group thing is all about, right? That's also
Yes.
somewhat new as well with ProShop Safe, where you can define with ProShop Safe Core, there's 3 defined groups of level of access. You can put people in those groups, but Safe Plus means you can completely customize it. And if you put things in certain folders, that limits read, write, view, access, all those different things just to the folders. But yeah, so classifications is really just like an extension on top of that to make it super extensible
Yep.
and flexible.
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. So hopefully, Frank, that is in the latest release. So if you have
522.
2, that's
Yep.
in there. You do need to go turn it on. I think that's in the system config developer tab to turn on classifications. But yeah, that's in your system today, more than likely. All right.
And we're probably going to be doing a lot more like an extra webinar on this, and
Yeah, there's a lot to
really
learn
digging
for,
in.
for
Yeah.
customers. Yeah, good call out. All right. Idle screen. So this is another thing. And actually just got a text on my phone this morning from a client in Colorado. It says, "Hey, loving the new idle screen feature." So this also was actually designed specifically for CMMC compliance, although it certainly can be just useful in general for keeping data a little bit more sensitive. You can set I think you can set a number of seconds or minutes that if you haven't touched your window, this idle screen notification will pop up and it will sort of gray out your entire screen. So if someone's just walking by your computer that you're now tending to the machine, but your computer is right there and you haven't touched it in 15 seconds or whatever you set, that it'll just kind of gray out and hide that information. Anything you want to add to that, Kels?
Yeah, I mean, I think the security standard here was, partly designed around, being able to look into enclosed spaces. So the space itself is secure, but sometimes being able to look into them is not. I mean, the spy
Right.
movie version is where they have the long range binoculars and they're looking through your office window to see what you're looking at. But,
Right.
who knows, right? But the idea is that this gives you some pretty simple protection against, casual observation of data you are
Mhm.
working on.
I love it. All right, this next one is particularly interesting to people in aerospace. I know people that supply Boeing directly very much have to deal with NetInspect for submitting their first articles into that system, and many other primes and OEMs also use NetInspect. We had a basic integration for NetInspect a long time ago. I think it was mostly through was it XML or J? I
It
forget
was an
exactly.
XML upload. Yeah,
Okay.
correct. Yep. Yep.
But some changes in NetInspect and their system kind of broke that for a while, and we've completely rebuilt that using the API. So now there's some pretty slick, and I don't have more screenshots of the actual interface since I don't have access to it myself, but some pretty slick ways to share your ProShop first article inspection data and just sync it right up into NetInspect. Do you know any additional things to add to that, buddy?
I mean, I think that this is actually very thorough. So everything that you've recorded in ProShop is data that NetInspect can use for the most part. There are a few unique to ProShop kinds of attributes on, the actual results table from first articles. But in general, almost all of the first article information that ProShop has, and certainly all the first article information that's required by NetInspect, is something that can be directly pushed just with a direct API. And then if you have access to that, NetInspect directly, you can click on it right from ProShop. It'll open that up, and you can view all your data in the NetInspect environment.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's also opened the door for us to continue on this path for people who are particularly NetInspect heavy, to be able to also possibly ingest data coming from primes if they've already predefined, all the part check information. Now with this API-based context, it's going to be much easier to do that.
Brilliant. Yep, I know there'll be some clients celebrating to the rooftops on that one. Because sometimes that can be a heavy, intensive data entry piece. All right, now we're going to get into some brand new stuff. So for those clients that are on this looks very different than what you're accustomed to. You will see that this is a work order page. And we have added these top 3 header cards. I will definitely add the caveat that this is still in development and refinement. So the exact fields we are including here, the exact size of the font, the spacing, things like that, that very likely will change a little bit. But the overwhelming feedback that we got was that in the previous version or the current version of ProShop, there's a lot of information right across the top. There's information about the planner and the programmer and what the per part value is if you have sensitive data enabled, and what the routing codes are, and lots of other things that, quite honestly, power users love to see that and really want to have even possibly more information density. But for a machinist or for someone that's brand new to the system, it's kind of a little bit of data overload. So we've done what we think is going to be a nice balance of providing just a more clean visual interest of just the most pertinent things to most people, like when does this work order need to leave our facility next? What's the status? Let me click on the approved drawing. What's the part number? And obviously, we've moved pictures up at the top. Previously, those pictures have been down below the operations table, and you have to scroll to the bottom to see what this picture looks like. So you'll see that there is now pictures right up at the top, and you'll notice these little arrows right here. So that indicates that there is a way to scroll between additional pictures. And there's a little plus button here that's a little light gray. You can add new photos right in here. And Kelsey, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. When that customer texted me this morning, he said, "Oh, I also love the new snapshot capability from the 3D model viewer." I know at some point we plan on possibly putting the model viewer up here, but now there's possibly a way if you upload a model to create a snapshot and then add that into this image carousel as well. For those that are familiar with work orders and all the purchasing, Cody, okay, yes, Snapshot is amazing. Thank you. I didn't even know we had a Snapshot tool, so it's always great to learn that from customers. These little icons on the left, these are what we call our purchasing status icons. They used to exist down in sort of the lower right over here. These are now stacked vertically. You can see there's lots of white space, so if you have a job with 5 different outside processes, those are all going to be stacked vertically here on the right-hand side. And then if I go to the next slide here, here's what it looks like with that left-hand panel expanded. So those icons are across the top. I'm pretty sure they will wrap to a second row if there's more than will fit. But some of those things that used to be always at the top and you didn't have the options to kind of minimize them will be listed here on the left-hand side. So if you really do need to know more information, this left-hand panel, which has been a part of our operations table for a couple of years now, that will be where all that more detailed information is found. And I've been told that this pane will remember per user whether you've had it opened or closed. So if you're a power user that really wants to know this information, way more often, you just leave this panel open and it'll always be there as you browse through the interface between
Yeah,
records.
that was really important to us, is to try and honor and even expand on what we could offer in the UI, while simultaneously making it simple. And so when you want to do both those things at the same time, there's a bit of tricky business. So that's where this slide out pane that remembers your specific settings is most valuable. And I hope that that lands with folks to be able to see a lot of content still, and also see some simplified views for folks who are uh, looking for just that.
Yeah. And I don't have images of it, but basically, uh, in addition to work orders, both all estimates and part records will also have this brand new interface. So those three are sort of like some of the real core backbone of, part management in ProShop. So start a new estimate, move it to a part, ultimately to a work order. All three modules will be moving to this new interface. All right. And this one, I'm just going to pause for a second here. We probably should have had this own slide, but down here in this lower right-hand corner, you can see this due with the date here. This is actually a new thing that's in 522. And I know, Kelsey, you were super instrumental in the creation of these must-leave by dates by operation, including, for those that are savvy, also this little refresh icon right next to this one here. Can you just describe for just a moment or two about what we've done to bring higher
For sure.
visibility to this area?
This was definitely something that we recognized a little while ago, was important, was this by operation must leave by. I think it's a critical part of being able to, understand exactly the progress of the work order, but we had it behind another click to show all of the operations and their must leave by dates. Well, I should say all of the operations, all the incomplete operations were shown and their must leave by dates. But it was just getting super underutilized. People were not going to that page. The layout wasn't perfect for people's alignment on what does it mean. The operation descriptions weren't readily available. And we said that doesn't make sense for us to kind of keep going down that path. Let's make that directly available in the complete column. And so then the question became, well, how could we make it even more valuable for clients? And we said, hey, that component of color coding, whether it's in the on-time window, ahead of schedule, or scheduled to be late. And I want to highlight that scheduled to be late. It doesn't mean it is late. It means based on where that operation lies in the series, you may have scheduled it onto a resource and it will not be complete on time for that operation. And you need to change something. So it should be immediately available and obvious on work orders whether or not every operation is currently scheduled to make its must leave by date. And so, that shows that, by the way, if you click on that, you get the schedule for it, if there is a scheduled resource. So there's some nice flow through in terms of UX being able to see directly into why, right? The second you see something red, the first question you ask is, wait a minute, why is that late? So you want to be able to just click straight on it, takes you to the schedule.
Yep. And I see a question, Kira. I'm pretty positive that quantity ordered will be right in those top header cards. I don't know if it's in the first one or the second one, but that is something we identified as pertinent enough to everybody. Is that correct, Kelsey? Am I misspeaking?
I'm pretty sure that was one of the ones we identified as needing to be added. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, somewhat early prototype, but thank you, Kira. That is a great and insightful question. All right, Kim, we'll get back to yours later. I want to move along here. This is a big one, and I know, Kelsey, you've been a major proponent and advocate of building this across the finish line. It happens to align with one of the Q&A we got even prior to the webinar. Let's talk about. Go ahead and share what we're doing here.
Yeah, this is something that obviously we were too light on. We had kind of worked into the system the ability to on a first article use a column next to the requirement to list gauges. But it was not a fulsome system, and it certainly didn't allow for in-process inspection to be identified as having used a specific gauge. So this brings together a number of different factors. Obviously, as you can see by here, it's listing a specific gauge that you have available in ProShop. That is the most traceable way. This doesn't show this, but if you were a company that wasn't tracing particularly to a gauge number, you could still put in the type of equipment you used. I used a micrometer for this, even if you weren't specifying the gauge ID number. Excuse me. But one of the key things about this is that it maintains the gauge that you're using as you continue through different inspection levels, so that like if you're at a machine and you're inspecting, you don't want to be in a situation where you're trying to list the gauge every single time you take a measurement. So it's assuming that you're using the same gauge all the way along, but gives you the immediate ability to remove a gauge and start with a different gauge. Let's say that one went in for calibration, or you decided that this wasn't the best tool to make the measurement with. You conferred with somebody and you agreed, yeah, we're going to use a different gauge for that. You switch at that point, and you still have all the historical, of course, context of all the ones you measured with the other gauge. So this is big. I'm glad this is here, and this will give traceability in some ways that I think we were really lacking, which is like if you really want to be clear exactly what dimensions, individual dimensions, were inspected by a particular gauge, you can know all the way from the first article to every single in-process inspection.
That is so huge. And while we're here on this page, I'll just highlight a couple of other things that are relatively new in the last 1 or 2 releases of ProShop. This column right here, inspection frequency, this allows you to define unique frequency per dimension. So maybe sometimes you need to check something at 100%, and other dimensions you're only checking, every 1 in 10. So you can set individualized inspection frequencies, and as you're running parts, it will tell you whether an inspection is required or advised or not necessary. And then, yeah, thank you for highlighting that, Kelsey. This parts complete is also a relatively new feature. I believe you do have to turn it on in your system. It doesn't automatically turn on when you get the new release, but this gives you the requirement to put in the number of parts that the inspector or the operator has made by the time they're doing that inspection. And that will automatically update the work order quantity, which means that automatically updates the schedule. So, at the frequency with which you're getting parts off and doing that inspection, you are keeping the entire system up to date with how many parts are made up to that moment in time. So while it's not directly feeding off the machines at this point, it's still getting you a pretty real-time view of how many parts are done, and of course the quality at that moment in time. Any other
Yeah,
things?
and even to that, I was just going to say on the how many you're getting off the machine. One of the things about machine monitoring that's awesome is it's 100% automated. One
Yeah.
of the things that's not as awesome is it's not totally clear just because you produced a cycle exactly what was made in that cycle. And this happens all the time for all kinds of reasons. You got 2 parts in a fixture, but you're wrapping up the work order, so you're only making 1. Well, somebody's got to intervene. Maybe there was one that goes to an NCR. Well, that's obviously got to be clear. And so there are lots of reasons to have some level of validation about how many are good at this point. And what this is giving us with this parts completed at this point in the inspection process is it's really giving us the ability to leverage that inspection frequency fully, so that we know for sure that we're actually inspecting enough parts to meet the requirements of what your customer specified or what the standard says. So that inspection complete part, that's big.
Awesome. All right, another big one, and this has been a hot request for companies that do a lot of bulk things. So a good example from one of our customers directly, they make composite parts. They lay out a big drag knife table of a big sheet of carbon fiber, and they're going to cut out 20 different work orders out of that same sheet of fiber. Or maybe it's someone, doing sheet metal, and they're laser cutting out dozens of part numbers from a huge sheet on their punch press or their laser. So this gives the ability to not only change upper level attributes, which are the ones that are typically on the top. Now they're going to be on the side in the future, like updating quantities and dates and other things like that.
Project managers,
Yep.
All kinds of stuff that you might be able to do. Yeah.
Yep. So we can see there's 2 tabs, this top level attributes. is what the one we're on right now. And then the next one here, our operations table. So this gives them the ability to say, sign off, you're certified to run, or your first article's been complete, or I now have 15 pieces done across a dozen work orders all at the same time, as opposed to having a dozen tabs open and going individually, updating those quantities or checking off that first article complete box.
Yeah, and one of the things that this slide doesn't really do justice, and we'll talk, this is obviously going to be coming, with many webinars, et cetera. But what you can do, like this shows the first work order in that list we looked at previously and all of its operations. But you can see that there's a big scroll bar over here. This is actually listing every work order that you saw in the previous list and every operation for those work orders. So right in this moment, you are able to edit every one of those work orders, every single operation. Now that sounds overwhelming. Oh my God, I have to scroll down the whole thing. There's a bunch you can do, including use the standard table, tools to filter for something. So say you only want one particular resource. You can filter at the bottom for that resource, and then it'll show you all the work orders, but only with that particular resource, and make edits in that way, or even end up changing total complete all at once with this. So let's say you were making, 5 work orders of 5 pieces through a single operation on a resource, filter for the resource, and then change all of them from null to 5. So that'll give you a real opportunity to modify and edit individual operation level attributes, in bulk and very quickly in, custom ways. 6 of those, 4 of those, 2 of those, 1 of those, done.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're a shop that does a lot of bulk things like that, this is going to be a huge time saver, and allow you to get all those things tidy and done and checked off with far less effort. So, all right, we are to the Stump the Founder section. Kelsey, get your brain wired up here. And we have a few, like I said, we have a few that were already submitted. We're going to jump into those first, and then hopefully if we get through these, we'll go to the live. I see there are a few coming in here into the Q&A, so thank you very much. And Robbie, how is gauge calibration tracked and taken care of? I know calibration can be used in the equipment module, but how can gauges be attributed to jobs to know they've been used? So Kelsey just outlined how that is going to be used. Previously we did have a field where you could type in a number, but it wasn't fully functional. It didn't track it to the gauge ID, so anyway, so that is that side of it. I'm gonna go not full screen here, and I'm gonna go ahead and switch to some actual live ProShop tabs. Let me come back to this question. So gauge calibration, of course, is going to be done through our equipment module. Let me just pull up another tab here. And we'll just pull up this one here. I don't know what it's going to look like, but the equipment module is where you can take any type of equipment or gauge or instrument and define it fully, and then put it on a schedule or any number of schedules. So you can set a frequency of how often it needs to be inspected or calibrated. You can have BOM items for it, maybe for changing batteries or oil or things like that. And then you can set who's responsible for it. In this case, Rob is our QA equipment person, although Brian is the one that checked it most recently. And then that will put it on a schedule, and it'll alert you. It'll show up on dashboards if it's not, if it's coming up to be due, and it'll turn red, of course, if it's past due. This one is more than a year past due. But anyway, that's how calibration is managed in ProShop. Yeah, so hopefully that answers that question. And then, of course,
I feel like that was a bit of a gimme, that one, Paul. It was
yeah,
like,
that
oh
seems
yeah.
pretty, but that is a question. And I don't know if it's the same Robbie who put in the Q&A, and I'll just ask this right now. We lost the option to mark PP check complete, op complete. How can we get that back? I do not know the answer to that one, Kels. Is that a
I can address that one right now. Pre-processing check type operations are actually driven on the complete box by the pre-processing checklist. So that's I'd have to dig in a little further about what you meant by get it back. But that checkbox right there, I think if you check this work order out, Paul, or edit this work order right now, you'll probably see that that box is checked. But that check mark right there, that is driven by the pre-processing checklist. So if you go to to the pre-processing checklist, you'll probably see that one,
Because
Paul.
we don't have a box to check.
Yeah, yeah, and that's because it's driven by that pre-processing checklist. So if you look at this pre-processing checklist, it's driven by this behavior in here. So it's looking to see if all of these things up to the full green meet the requirement, and if so, then it checks that box off. And if
I see.
not, it leaves that box unchecked. So it's actually fully dependent on this. There isn't a manual override that. Yeah.
Got it. Isn't it? Makes
Yep.
sense. Okay.
Yeah, so we got that one.
Okay. Very good. All right. Next question. Thank you, Jim, for this. How does or can any CMMS software such as ProShop or any other market-ready related IT tool for maintenance help define our reactive maintenance, firefighting, as often called, versus planned maintenance versus predictive and condition-based? So it's a fantastic question. Obviously,
And
there,
just
yeah,
because everyone poo-poos, reactive as like the terrible thing, sometimes it happens. Like something unexpected happened to you that you were going to have a hard time predicting. You close the door and it won't open anymore, and you're like, "Whoa, what happened?" And there was no good preventative maintenance or predictive maintenance that was going to help you with that particular problem. So getting in and having a tool to be able to do the reactive part is helpful, and we'll show you that part now.
got it. Yeah, so I have an example of a piece of equipment up here. So you can see this is the same module we looked at with that caliper, but this is for a machine tool, and you'll notice it's on many different defined schedules for preventative maintenance. But at the bottom here, we have an example of an unscheduled maintenance, unscheduled service. In this case, they have it labeled as crash. But you could have one or multiple different types of unplanned maintenance items on here. Now, when you have something, let's say you crash it, you can just click the checkbox. It will create a new record that comes up on this table, and you can then record what happened. You can put in notes, you can add attachments. Obviously, there's dates, there's times, there's people involved. So it's a little bit ad hoc, but you can absolutely fully document something that happened. Let's say you got it recalibrated by a machine technician that came in. You could even add in that new certification right there, unless you maybe had another item that you had for, for occasional calibration. You could check it there as well. But yeah, this is certainly a way that you can track right inside of ProShop without any additional spreadsheets or anything else, any of that unplanned or reactive maintenance. To come back to the question, obviously planned maintenance is pretty well defined by those other line items. Predictive maintenance, as well as condition-based, which I had to look up, and that's basically choosing maintenance based on the current condition of the machine. So maybe a little bit semi-reactive, but still proactive at the same time. Do you want to speak to those ones, Kelsey? Obviously, since we're not directly feeding off the machines, we do have some limitations about something that is based on you're seeing more vibration in the spindle. So therefore, you need to do this other type of maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, without connectivity to that kind of sensor that's actually giving the feedback about what the condition on the machine is, of course, it's pretty tough for any tool to be able to do condition based. And actually, realistically, also that sort of truly predictive kind of approach, you need to have the sensors in place to be able to predict what's going on. Aside from sort of what I would say is historical or human intuition about something. So if you've been maintaining something every 3 months and you notice that it's really too long to let it to 3 months, you can change your preventative maintenance to another frequency, of course. But the truly predictive or condition based does require that sensor component. And at the moment, we don't have any sensors to machine tools.
Yep, well said.
But
So there are certainly some things you can do within the system, but yeah, there are some limitations since we're not directly getting machine data. Frankie, thank you. Frank, thanks for the question here. Do we still recommend using work orders to track machine repairs? I would say absolutely. Similar to this one where we have a coolant maintenance part number linked right here. Yeah, if you're doing a multi-step process that you want to have some validation on, or some pictures added, or some sign-offs on different things, creating a work order to manage the doing of that work, even scheduling it into your schedule so you can have the machine down for a few hours. So relevant, so worthwhile doing.
yeah,
Imagine trying to manage any kind of scope of work without a record of making that happen, and just the fact that the parts in the work orders module can be such a perfect fit for that type of work, I think makes it a no-brainer.
yeah, we used to use that actually at ProCNC for ball bar testing. We had our own ball bar, and on some regular basis, we would go ahead and try and set up to ball bar test specific machines. Obviously, as they get older, maybe they need a little more frequently. But that is, similar to that coolant maintenance. That would be, a preventative or at least an instructive kind of where is this machine at, and probably give you some opportunity to change some of that. So definitely work order based for that kind of maintenance.
All right, awesome. We'll move on to the next one here.
Oh, hey, Paul, sorry, just
Yeah.
one quick thing on that. Can you just jump back to that maintenance? I wanted to highlight one thing that is probably overlooked, and I noticed it's actually not on this one. Can you scroll up just a little bit here? Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight this check resources column. That's probably an underutilized feature just because people don't know what that does exactly. And the idea behind a check resource is that you can list any task in this field. And by doing so, listing that task, instead of the check description being some typed in sort of component, it will actually tell you what the task description is and link you there to be able to complete a full task if you weren't going to go all the way to a work order and document various kinds of results. You could go ahead and see the task to do something like that so that you wouldn't necessarily say you need this individually on every single piece of equipment. This check the air gauge regulator. The air gauge regulator check might be the same for all of the hoses you have. And so you have a specific task that people are trained on, and you can go ahead and put that in there, right? So in that check resource field, you can put one or more, of those, task IDs, just the ID, Paul, just that
Okay.
90, just that bit there. And that'll automatically link it to that task and give you some additional indication about this is part of this, and give you the straight link to
Oh,
how
look at
to
that.
actually complete that.
I didn't
So a
even
little
realize.
underutilized, but
Yeah.
it's really actually a really good system to lead people into the processes you want them to use, which is understand how to do things, be trained on them, use the documentation to actually complete that particular set of work, even if it's not a full work order, because a work order has sort of a slightly higher level of overhead associated with it.
Yeah. And as I'll point out right here, particularly if that thing is tied to any of your regulatory compliance, you can add it to the requirements fulfillment system and make sure that you know that by doing this item and the people that are trained to do it, you are helping meet the requirements of, in this case, the AS 9100 standard.
Yep.
So it really does continue to sort of deepen the relationship between the QMS and, in this case, the CMMS aspect of ProShop in a way that's just really clear and visible for people. So that's awesome. Thanks for pointing that out, Kelsey. I love it. I
I
love
know we're
learning new
tight on
stuff.
time. How can we,
Yes.
how much have we got left? Well, we still got a
Yeah, we
few.
have a few. Internal tools for work order continuous improvement. Yeah, so we've already talked a little bit about that. I'll just show a couple of other things here. Here's an example of using the equipment module for driving a 5S process, where you can have pictures and requirements and, again, frequencies of how often people need to go do those 5S activities. And then I have a work order, this one here. So this is a part, not a work order, sorry. But here's an example of using a ProShop part to drive a Kaizen, a small Kaizen event. So you can have the template for it in the part module, and then you can publish a work order to it, change the resource maybe if you're going to be, taking down an area for a little while or whatever you need to do, and then track everything that's happened, document what you did. So that's one way to drive continuous improvement in ProShop using work orders. Ben question, our setups take way too long. What are ways to shorten those setups? It's a really good question. I would say, as just a general rule, you need to really think about what you can separate as external setup versus internal setup. Most of the time, long setups happen or when someone needs to leave a machine because they have to go find something or get something that wasn't already done and prepped and ready to go. We firmly believe that you should be able to go to a machine with your fully prepped job and without leaving the machine, have your first part in hand ready to inspect. And if you had to leave, then that means something wasn't done in advance. And quite honestly, that really gets back to this pre-processing checklist. If you do this thoroughly, whether it's in ProShop or whether it's on a piece of paper, the lean concept of taking external setup and separating it from internal setup is probably one of the most important things for reducing setup times. And when we see customers, really kind of lean into this and make sure they're doing it religiously, it's often a 50% reduction in setup time. Yeah, and there's some ways that you can go to the place
this is
to
more than a
actually do those
checklist.
items. Yeah.
Yeah, this is like a activity, right? This is taking you straight to where you can complete all these tasks, including those items that Paul was talking about, pre-processing.
Yeah, this is clearly from a customer. Many of our customers have multiple shipping addresses in different parts of the country, so the standard shipping days would be dependent on location. And I know there's a follow-up question. Additionally, sometimes customers define different shipping methods that they want, so overnight versus ground. Kelsey, I know you can speak to this one.
So I can say that on the client or the contact page, we do not yet support a number of shipping days for every address, with which we would then default the shipping days for work orders that were assigned from that customer PO. So right now, we do not support that piece. But of course, you can and should update shipping days accordingly based on not only different locations, but also based on, whether you're going to ship it red or overnight or deliver it the same day. Those are items that you should definitely consider because they are going to drive this work order must leave by date, which is super important. And those choices that you make should be reflected on the work order so that everyone can trust that the must leave by dates are real. The biggest problem here is that somebody says, oh yeah, but it doesn't take 5 days to ship it to them. It only takes 1 day. So I'm not too worried about the work order must leave by date. It's like, no, we have to put it in ProShop what the actual days we're going to ship it is, and then everybody has to work to the must leave by date. We have to hit that date.
Yeah. Yeah, so important. And we know that we've had clients go from 50, 60% on-time delivery to 95, 98% on-time delivery just by focusing on some of those best practices. I think we have actually, unfortunately, with 1 minute left, run out of some of these questions. Maybe we need to do a number 2, but there's lots of really good questions here. But one of the things we have to do is announce our NASCAR race winners. And this is the list of folks. So Ryan Funk, Ryan Koch, and Joseph Roberts. You guys win the VIP passes. I think you all are all on this because you had to be present to win. Yeah, Joseph at least is here. So congratulations to you guys. Hopefully you have a fantastic time hanging out with Roush Yates and our partners over at the NASCAR race. And thank you all so much. This has been, I think we want to do this again because this has been a fun experiment. I love all the engagement. I love sort of being live. We will definitely record all the questions that we received either through the Q&A or if we didn't get to some of the ones that you pre-scheduled, and I promise we will answer those and get those back to you. But yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for.
and if we don't have a poll for it, but if you like this and you thought it was good, give us a rating, 1 to 5 in the chat real quick, and then we'll tally those up later. If you thought this wasn't really the right kind of webinar, score us low. We really want to do the right thing here, and so give us a heads up at where we're at. Nice. Okay, it's coming in. Yeah, pop it in the chat, and we'll tally that up later.
Awesome.
Awesome.
All righty. Well,
Okay,
thank you all
thanks
so much.
everybody.
Appreciate you joining and engaging today.
Yeah,
We'll see
this
you
was
all soon.
fantastic. All right, people.
Bye bye.